thank you everybody for being here. So I will talk, how does it work?
Okay. It needs to be pointed a bit more towards there.
I will briefly talk about Decode, privacy, and digital commons. What is Decode? Decode is a European project of Horizon 2020. The acronym stands for Decentralized Citizen-Owned Data Ecosystem. So the idea is give power to the people. This is the idea of Decode project. Decode project will be, some other people will tell you about Decode because here there are different partners of Decode project. There is Jaromir from Dine, there is Francesca Bria from Barcelona City Council, there is Nesta, which is also, Nesta from, who's a partner of the Decode project. The goals of the Decode project: give power to the people and create new tools that work on the blockchain to allow people to have more control over their data. Nexa is a research center on internet and society. It's part of the Polytechnic of Torino, and it's an interdisciplinary research center. We are involved in Decode for legal and ethical issues. So we analyzed, and we will continue to analyze legal and ethical issues involved in the development of Decode technology. Until now, we worked on analyzing legal frameworks involved with the creation of digital commons, because one of the ideas within Decode is to be able to foster generation of digital commons, hopefully including digital commons that include personal data. So, this is until now the main results we found analyzing the different legal frameworks involved with the technology, with the creation of digital commons. We started from free software licenses, this is, and copyright and patent issues involved with generation of free software, creation of free software. Then we analyze different digital commons that until now are available. And what we find is that there is an opportunity with blockchain, particularly with blockchain that allow what they call smart contracts, or we call within the Decode project smart rules. This is just a name for something, but I have to clarify one issue. A smart rule or a smart contract is not necessarily a contract in the legal sense, because a contract from the legal point of view is something, an act that creates obligations among people, or entities. But sometimes, depending on let's say, smart contracts and smart rules, how we call them, allow to make legal contracts. So we think this is a very interesting aspect of blockchain technologies, because we can use this feature to deal with issue, including issues that have to be complied with when we take into consideration privacy. Processing personal data requires to make to comply with some obligations. The data controller has to provide information to the data subject. The data subject sometimes has to give consent. And so these things can be managed using the smart contract, smart rule technology. So maybe moving from free software to other digital commons, moving from licenses, which not necessarily are contracts, to contracts and privacy compliance, we could achieve to foster trust, the building of communities, and new digital commons, including maybe made of personal data. Some other people will give you technical details about how, Decoded works. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. You can come here, yeah. So now let me introduce Rosingholm, Chairwoman at Atstack. It's a company that provides digital entitlements such as ads and donation through blockchain technology and digital identity. Over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been very, very interesting to listen to the discussion so far. As mentioned, I'm chairing Atstack's board. And I'll start by telling you one shocking fact, and that is that over 2 billion people today have no legal identity. That basically means that they're excluded financially and socially from products and services that we take for granted. Now, Atstack was the first company in the world to deliver humanitarian aid over blockchain. And they did that to Syrian refugees in Lebanon. I'll show you how that works. So here you'll see a video soon by Gabrielle from the Red Cross, who is onboarding recipients that are entitled to aid. So Syrian refugees in the Aqqa refugee camp in Lebanon. Here is the CEO, Joseph Thompson of Atstack. And here are the entitlement that they received over a card. They can also receive it on their phone, that then take to the merchants to redeem their entitlements. In this case, it was for food vouchers. Atstack was also, to briefly mention, so 400 vouchers were redeemed, and 20 vouchers were fraudulent and so stopped at point of sale, which is the advantage of blockchain. So you can basically distribute aid completely transparently and with full traceability, which is why this is attracting so much interest from some of the large NGOs and also government donors. It's also a very easy system to use, and it took us 10 minutes to train the merchants to use the system. Atstack was also the first company to distribute humanitarian aid in Ireland to women in the traveller community, and we did that with an organization called St. Vincent de Paul. It was the same concept as in Lebanon, so it's food vouchers. There we had zero fraud, and we had 100%, of course, traceability and transparency, which is what blockchain bring to the table, or distributed ledger as it's been spoken about. Now, everything that Atstack does is focused on digital identity. So the digital identity is the enabler for recipients to receive aid as digital entitlements. And so they are issued with either a card or a QR code on their phone that they can use, as you saw in the videos, that they can use to redeem their products and services that have been tokenized. And we believe also that blockchain has a unique position to help UN Sustainable Development Goal 16.9, which basically aims to get everyone onto, or for everyone to have a legal identity by the year 2030, which is an ambitious, very ambitious goal. Having a digital identity and of course a legal identity enabled you to be financially and socially included. Now, Atstack is focused on really 4 verticals today. We do remittances, we do welfare, we do aid, and we also have developed a donation app, which we believe will be very important in terms of re-engaging individual donors in the space. So let me show you how the donation app works. So you'll see our COO now, Denis here. He will be choosing what kind of aid he wants to send, the value of that aid, the recipient, which in this case is himself. He fills in his card details, which will then be processed, and what you will see there is a summary of the transaction at the end. Now, what is not shown here is basically the second part of that leg, and that is for the individual to receive that aid, and the donor will receive a text message that the aid has been received by its rightful person. Let's see. Now, we have some great customers and partners on board today. We work with UNDP, we work with the International Federation of the Red Cross. We're working with also an organization called St. Vincent de Paul. And so we're doing a remittance, non-cash remittance project in Serbia, which has kicked off. We are doing the largest social welfare program in Jordan, starting early next year, which is for delivery of food vouchers and cash transfers to 10,000 recipients, Jordanian citizens. And then we're working with St. Vincent de Paul in the US to deliver aid to families who've been impacted by the hurricanes. And the technology is, broadly speaking, the same for all of these products and services. And then finally, we are also launching our donation app, which can be a white label solution to many of these organizations, which we think will be an absolute game changer in terms of bringing more donations from individuals into these aid organizations, and then traceable to the end recipient. Now, we were lucky enough to receive IBM's #1 Global Startup Award earlier this year, and these partnerships mean a lot to us when it comes to scaling up. The founder and CEO of Atstack was also nominated as UN SDG Pioneer earlier this year. Again, very important for us when it comes to accessing the markets that we are selling into. And then finally, we also received City's Global Game Changer Award just a couple of months ago for using technology to fight corruption and increase transparency, and the same was the case with MasterCard. So these partners again mean a lot to us, and we couldn't have sort of done it without some of our partners. So with that, I will end, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Let me now welcome on stage Denis Roio, co-founder and chief technology officer at Dyn.org, a non-profit that provides decentralized citizen engagement technology for participatory democracy. Over to you.
Thank you, Simona. I'm very honored to be back in Italy in such a big room of people talking about blockchains. There is plenty of interesting stuff going on. And I come to introduce you to the technical work that we are doing in Decoded, this project that was funded 5 million by the European Commission in the framework of the ICT 12B. We are working very actively now since a year to develop reliable blockchain technologies for the privacy and for many things that Marco has already explained, with some excellent partners, among them 2 cities, the city of Amsterdam and the city of Barcelona, both cities of the future in Europe, and also with excellent centers of research like the University of Radboud in Nijmegen, Netherlands, or the Nesta organization that is with us, and many other researchers, the University Center, the UCL in London, the blockchain studies course that they have. And well, about my organization, we are pretty atypical. We are sort of radio ham amateurs, radio amatori, one would say in Italian. We come from the BBS time. We have been maintaining 2 musea of ancient computers here in Italy, one in Palazzolo Acreide and one in Cosenza, where you can visit and still put your hands on working PDP-11, Data General Eclipse, and these sort of computers. We love Unix. We do things for modularity. We love the principle of decomposing things, and this is an interesting insight on what we are doing also in Decoded. We try to modularize what we are doing and really cover it with tests. Where is it pointing? Can I go? Yeah. So this is a slide about the building block that we have in Decoded. What we really try to use is, yes, distributed ledgers, fancy technologies. You can have kittens on it. And then we also use certificate transparency, which is a very important building block in terms of understanding whom you are giving the data to, and also on how to use the blockchain. As well, one cryptographic finding that has been overlooked so far, which is attribute-based cryptography. So with attribute-based, you don't have the usual asymmetric key situation. You can have attributes that allow you to access certain information. We are looking very closely also to zero-knowledge proof schemes, in which actually you can know if someone, for instance, is above 18 years old without knowing the date of birth of this someone. So to actually keep the privacy of people. And then we have nodes that we try to deploy. We try to make these nodes pretty modular with a smart rule language that we are developing to be really understandable and also visually represented. And we want these nodes to contain certain software and be composed, and also to run on very small boards. So we have small nodes that can run on ARM boxes. We have middle nodes, and we have a vision of a network that should be a peer-to-peer network. Right now we are using also Tor as a network because it's very solid, very private, and it's run all over the world. We are trying to really build the blocks and use the blocks that exist and proven technologies to compose all this. I have a lot more to show you about the technology of this, but I don't want to bore you so much on this, and I have an urgency to tell you, and I will use this stage for it, about this permissioned and permissionless technology shilling that we are seeing. It's quite ridiculous because this whole blockchain hype, that is now a hype and it started in 2010, it did start because we did not trust these companies. We did not trust the banks. We did not trust all these people that are running these centralized systems. They are fake. They lied to us, they just failed completely. So how can we trust them now? Because they jump on the hype of the blockchain and tell us that they can run a blockchain. So power to the people was exactly that moment in which Satoshi Nakamoto left the gate open and said, okay, guys, we can do it, and we are making millions with it. And people are doing more altcoins and more systems that are completely decentralized. If you hear a permissioned blockchain, that has no sense. You can just do a database that is replicated. What are the problems? Scalability? No. SegWit, Lightning Network is going to be implemented on Bitcoin. The scalability problem is going away. Privacy? You can have Zcash. You can have zero-knowledge proof on the blockchain, and then you just get away with that. And what was the third argument? The sort of certificate auditing. Well, this is the beautiful thing of permissionless blockchains, is that everyone can audit, not only the authorities. You can have anyone auditing what is happening. And that's trust, okay? So this is technology for the people. And well, I conclude with one takeaway. We have already a result in the Decoded project. It's Dev1. It's an operating system that targets already 20 or more. Now we are at 30 different ARM boards. So Arduino, Raspberry, Cubiboard, Odroid, what you want. You can certify your image, put in your GNU Linux free software, and run your blockchain, run your contracts on it, and it's going to be free. So I hope that people will engage this technology and will go to the prize with something that is really distributed and gives really the power to the people. Thank you.
Big thanks to our speakers. So, oops, 2 microphones, too much. Any questions from the audience? Raise your hand. No one. Okay, there are a couple. Don't be shy. Here and here.
Hello, I'm Marcello from Fondazione per la Scuola. And I wanted to ask you specifically, when using blockchain in the kind of aid world, how much is connectivity and access to internet or mobile telephones and all that, how much is that an obstacle? And is there anything you're trying to do to overcome it? In Italian? Yeah. No. Volevo chiedere a lei nello specifico se usando blockchain in foreign aid, in aid, in development aid, etc., se accesso a connettività internet, a devices, eccetera, è un ostacolo e in che modo, in che misura stanno cercando di aggirarlo.
Sì.
Okay.
Oh, okay. And feel free to compliment. I mean, our system now, it does require internet connection. I mean, you can do it through, Raspberry Pi computers, etc. But I think the simple answer is that the base case, it will require internet connection. And so we are working on solutions for that. But for our current projects, we're assuming that we are able to have some internet connection.
I had a remark, actually. It's a very intelligent question because we often forgot that connectivity issue. And for instance, the Catalonian government used, for their particular poll that they did, this referendum, used a system based on IPFS, which was a pretty well-tailored system, had encryption, could distribute people the certificates to vote, but it was shut down by IP, by the government, the Spanish government, and by DNS. So we have not to forget that. I think Tor is a good answer to that, but because it goes on small connectivity, but and also the fact that we can have paper wallets is very, very interesting, so that you can have a sort of exchange person by person. But this is an aspect that must be always focused on.
And we had another question over there.
Sergei Gorinsky, MD, Networks Institute, Madrid, Spain. Well, it's a question probably mostly to Yaramil, because it was a passionate speech, right? And you could see a reaction from the audience, kind of a lot of excitement and social activism. But I was actually thinking about what Fabrizio said in his talk, and he showed that this power to the people, right? And was essentially from the economic activity point of view, it was tiny, negligible point, right? And things are being done still by the giants, by Amazon, Google, Facebook, or Intesa. So my question is, how do you see the future, right? So it's good to have this excitement, but in terms of kind of emerging and becoming a big economic player, how do you see, it's happening? And I'm coming from a kind of academic point of view. I had some, academic idea about for collaborative economy kind of type of thing. And somebody told me, well, I know, we had this idea already in the business world, but the first 3 people who did it, they were friends. When the 4th guy came, he became a customer. So do you see a different type of reality where, I know, we have big economic entities of a Google size, Apple size, but they're not controlled and run by a small group of people, but really the sharing of wealth is on a million people or billion people scale. So do you see this transition? I don't know whether I'm making my point clear, and maybe it's not only to Jaromil, but to other panelists as well.
I'm not a prophet, although I saw many things of the blockchain coming, but predicting the future is very hard. But what I think is what we are witnessing is an European Commission that wants to give a prize to people that do decentralized things that give people power. So this is obviously an opening field for new players, not for the same old corporations, not for companies to which we are tied by 10, 20 years contracts with cities, not to companies that actually did not have delivered, because we have companies that are releasing certificates, SSL certificates, that are failing completely at keeping them private, keeping them secure. So we have like a centralized structure for security that is failing. So we have a scenario in which we have government bodies that say, okay, this sort of thing is not the only thing that we want. So I'm not saying we will decentralize everything. I don't believe it will be possible to decentralize everything within, 100 years. But at least we are seeing an opening to the sort of ethos that we have demonstrated to be possible to realize and also to empower people, which is the ethos that all the blockchain, the distributed ledger, and the crypto scene, it's really the name of it, the crypto scene has brought in. So this sort of ethos that asks for privacy, decentralization, and new opportunities for smaller local companies, this sort of ethos is a good one, I think, and it will find space in the future of our digital smart cities, because that's about an infrastructure that will deal with a lot of more information, with a lot more high-speed demand and answer to what people want. And this high speed and this particular sort of, this sort of high-speed desire that we have in the city, that really handles with a lot of demand and answers, like will not only be centralized by mega multinationals like Uber, like Airbnb, that are not even paying taxes on our own grounds. It will be provided by people that can actually build infrastructure that is less liable. Because if you run on a distributed ledger system something that is cryptographically sound, and you actually manage to do something that is at least pre-quantum proof, then you can actually say that your company is not liable for holding that data. You can have a shared infrastructure for that data. So you don't need to have big data centers. So the same thing that happened to Bitcoin will happen in many more businesses that deal with data. We don't need anymore a big minting house with armed guards on the perimeter, with thick walls and a really secret procedure to actually mint money. And the same way, we will not need anymore a guarded data center, because we can distribute that. And even in our case in Decoded, we are asking our partners to keep a little box on their desk, not even notice the IT. For our experiments, you don't even need to mobilize all the IT. You keep that little box, and it will compute things back and forth with the peer-to-peer network to actually provide data. At what speed, we will see. Things can be fixed with time, and Bitcoin actually is demonstrating it with its own capabilities. I hope I answered your question, and there is a whole conference needed to actually debate this.
We have a question here.
Okay, so you have been very provocative, but it's totally acceptable. I mean, it makes, even if I'm not a spokesperson from Microsoft, from my point of view and my background as an open source developer, I want to just ask you, don't you think that some step can be done
also thanks to the companies that can be committed in having a sustainable business model, but providing in any case something for the sake of the community. This is because, for instance, I've seen my company changing from a very focused company on its cash cow and then embracing a totally different approach and committing on open source. And the evolution of this technology, and I don't want to go further, we can discuss later, is something where we are committed in open. So don't you think that the companies that clearly every one of us cannot trust, I do not trust Intesa, they do not trust me, you do not trust both of us, but don't you think that we can have a role also as a company in arriving in some result, and maybe there are applications where we can go totally with a public blockchain, and other cases where we can have some benefit with the permission of the blockchain?
Yeah, I do believe so. You're right in mentioning open source benefits from the contribution of a lot of companies. The Linux kernel, the BSD kernel do. So it is important to have actually professionalizing and maintaining and supporting people that really want to work on things that work. But there are some ethical boundaries. You know, open source now, Microsoft finally understood the value of it. And it took how many years? So, you know, it also took the sort of activism to demonstrate it, and then slowly things are changing. So if people don't understand that there are options, even if they sit as a monolithic, you know, oligopoly into a sector, like banks are doing, you know, they think that money exists only in virtue of banks, because we can put it in a database and they will maintain that database. Bitcoin demonstrated that we can have money without banks in a digital era. This was like the big change, the big paradigm shift. So banks will become optional, will become professionals that actually know how to keep in custody your money better than you. You know, otherwise you will lose your wallet or whatnot, but will not become the only option that you have to keep money. And this is important to understand. People will be free to choose. So there is a sort of competition that will be there in terms of quality of service that will be provided. And service, it's always work, and work should be paid. So why not have a business there? So thank you for this.
So probably two questions. One is about the Decoded project, whether in that context you have thought about using data as the incentive for the blockchain in itself, like the Bitcoin, so that I get, how to say, a reward for sharing my data, so that it's an asset, a personal asset that I can use consciously and in a way. And on the other side, from a legal point of view, what could be the approach that favor a decentralized approach? Because nowadays, what is being done is to try to mitigate the misuse of the centralized approach, so closing. What could be a legislative approach in order to open up and favor decentralized architectures?
Well, about the incentive, we haven't tackled this issue. We are really building blocks. Now we just started building a language, a contract language, as I mentioned, and it's a tricky part, how to incentivize running these boxes. So one thing could be that it really lowers the overheads of organizations, and then the incentive is just like by running on this system, you service also other people using it, and you're lowering your overheads. And that's one approach. I tend to, what we're trying to do is to not make a financial application out of this. Decoded is not about yet another financial application. Actually, I think that a lot of financial institutions are very toxic in the blockchain world, because it's not only about that. We should open the field to more sort of applications and to more different approaches. So in putting an incentive that is sort of monetary will defeat the purpose, will be alpha failure. So we're trying to not put that sort of incentive. We're trying to make a system that really, it's that interesting to run, because you save money with it, and then you will run it.
Concerning legislation, I don't care very much about possible future legislations that could help. I think it's not useful to focus on this, because it's just postponing in the future something that could happen. I find more useful to look at the legislation like it is today. And I think that in the legislation like it is today, there are good opportunities. GDPR, the new General Data Protection Regulation, is a great opportunity for free software and for the generation of commons made of data. For example, talking about free software, one of the requirements of the new General Data Protection Regulation is privacy by design and by default. When you project your processing from the very beginning, you have to choose technology that are privacy compliant. If you use free software that is clearly documented, that shows you that is privacy compliant, I think you have no option. You have an incentive to use free software. So today we have an incentive for free software projects to document that the software is privacy compliant, and an incentive for all the others, the software users, to adopt free software solutions because that show that the software is privacy compliant. Concerning the other advantage, the other incentive we saw from the legal situation we have today, I said before, we have the possibility to build new contracts and way to pass data from one person to the other. Today we are used to terms of services that are made by the data controller. So they're made to acquire rights for the data controller. This technology maybe allows to build something that is similar to the free software licenses, in the sense that many people can adopt because it's better for them to allow use of their data. But we will see how good we will be in doing this within the project.
Okay. There is time for a last question. Anyone? I have a question for you, Ton. I really liked your project, your presentation. You were telling me earlier that you're also working with some public administration in Europe. Could you tell us a bit more about that? Because it could be, in Italy we have a lot of people that also don't have an identity, a legal identity, and it would be good to see what are the opportunities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So very briefly, so we spoke about, 2 billion people not having a legal identity today. It is actually the case as well for many who arrive in Europe. And the unprecedented flow of immigration flows into Europe today, which poses a host of practical questions, moral questions, etc. And we have been speaking with the governments, engaging with them in terms of how to best respond to that. And I think it comes back to really 2 important points. One, what is the ability using blockchain, digital identity, to extend aid and the assistance that they need quickly and seamlessly over a system that's not too cumbersome, so that effectively you protect their rights, you protect their privacy, but you can do it more quickly and more seamlessly than the existing bureaucracy permits you to do. And the other thing is integration. How can you integrate them so that they can become quite quickly productive members of society? And I think maybe one thing that I would just bring up is, I think there's a point that was made earlier today, is that there are a number of children coming to Europe unaccompanied, no documentation, And so effectively to be able to extend the digital identity to people will enable them to receive aid more quickly, and also to a certain extent enable the authorities or the NGOs to have some sort of not control, but to be able to extend some sort of formal identification to this. So that's something that we're actually seeing. I think it's not only an issue here in Italy, it's an issue across the board. And so blockchain does have the advantage of being a simple, seamless system to use to quickly respond to this. So very happy to take any questions you may have on that.
Yeah, I think, okay, one last. Let's do one very last one. Okay, this time. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Actually, it's more of a continuation of this previous question, but I'll try to make it short. So just to make more clear, so what's your view on economic sustainability, right? So going beyond grants from European Commission or any other government, right, that academics consume, develop ideas, but don't get, adopted. So how do you see this type of, different type of industrial organization can take place and become big in scale, so that we can look at this quadrangle on power to the people, and we have a huge entity there. I don't know, it's cooperative or any other kind of social structure, right? As opposed to big corporation adopting the technology for their own needs, and what's happening before with open source or now with blockchain.
Well, I think that here trust is the currency. Maybe it's not evaluated immediately, but over time it changes things. Over time it makes one of these giants realize that open source is needed, otherwise they're just failing. Over time it's trust is really a currency. People were in the Occupy movement, people were on the street, camping together, not afraid of each other, complete unknowns, under the banks, saying, you should not be bailed out, you are failing, your lead is failing, and that was abundance of trust. There is a lack of trust for the top, but there is an abundance, a really incredible abundance of trust at the bottom. So here, trust is really the currency. And if we lower the overheads to create systems in which people believe, and maybe they are not global, maybe they are just local, maybe it's just a town, a neighborhood, we trust each other. People will not just fake or lie or fraud each other. Then, if we lower the overheads for creating those sort of economies, then trust will circulate much faster, and we will actually build something on the abundance of trust that right now we are not able to use. We just send cops to beat them up. We just send violence to just lower it down. And again, this was the pattern in Bitcoin. We beat the monopoly of violence. There is no need to have an ATM on the street, a guard. There is another level of trust in a sort of algorithm. So I think the equation is really about trust and overheads. If we lower the overheads for people to build what they believe in, then we will enable a lot of more situations to grow.